What does it mean to be the enemy of my truth? What does it mean to be the enemy? How does that show up in your everyday? Does it show up as guilt, as shame? Does it show up as deep fear of not meeting others' expectations or your own? We explore all of these emotions and feelings in the depths of what the enemy of your own truth looks like in each episode, in different scenarios, through guest speakers, through client interview, and through my own question and answers with all of you. Welcome to today's episode, where I dive into a deeply personal and empowering journey. About 16 years ago, I discovered I was dyslexic. A moment I remember that brought both clarity and challenge to me. In this episode today, I'll share how that revelation shaped me, not as a limitation, but as a kind of source of unexpected strength and resilience from understanding my unique way of processing the world to embracing it as part of who I am. This is a story about my truth, empowerment, and the unexpected gifts that come with seeing things differently while finding the acceptance to honor who I truly am today. So all through school, when I was a young kiddo, I had a really hard time learning how to read. Most things I was slower at, and being held back in first grade because I couldn't read very well. Fast forward into school, I had a hard time taking multiple choice tests. I had a really difficult time with my teachers because my handwriting was so messy. I would be in handwriting classes and I just could not allow myself to write in a way that was neat on the lines. They were always crooked at an angle. My handwriting has never been the same more than once. I try really hard, but there's not a lot of consistency or neatness to my writing. And so as time went on, I would be very insecure about my writing. And that started to translate into, my teenage years and into early adulthood when I would have to write thank you cards. And I just was so embarrassed by my handwriting because I couldn't write legibly. Sometimes I could, but a lot of the times I couldn't, and my hand would get really tired. And in addition to that, I couldn't find the words inside my mind to write on the card or form a sentence that made sense or to put sentences together. I mean, I could do it, but they would be very simple or very basic because it's like I was constantly going inside my mind to find my words. One day I was in my therapist's office and I was navigating the end of my marriage. And she is one of those therapists that is just a light in your life. She was a great teacher to me, a great mentor. And I remember one day being in her office, just talking to her, and she says, if you could do anything, Anne, what would you do? And I said, I've always wanted to go into the medical field and help people, like maybe be a nurse or a doctor or something of that sort. And she's like, why didn't you ever do that? And I basically looked at her and said, because I've never really been able to pass tests very well. I don't know the information. And she looked at me and she said that she's like, it's not about how well you do on the test. It's about your profound way you connect things in life, your high moral compass. And from what I can see on this side, your intelligence to know things that you just cannot learn on a test. And she said, have you ever been, tested and evaluated for dyslexia? And I looked at her and I said, what? And it just took me off guard because no one had ever said that to me. And she said something to the point of that when you have so much going on in your head and trying to pull it in, you just can't always make sense of it, but it doesn't equate to your intelligence, they're two separate things. And the degree of what I know about things and my interest and the way that I connect. She said something about that, and you don't look to master something, you look for connection. And once you have connection, you move on. And it just was this light bulb moment, like, well, yeah, that's me. And so everything kind of started to come into a clearer picture. That eventually led me, with this hesitation to understand what dyslexia is and to reach out to somebody in Amesbury, Mass. Her name is Karen Legitimacy. And we're probably talking about maybe 16 years ago. And I remember going on her website, New England Dyslexia Solutions, and they offer the Davis program, which is just an incredible program for helping those with dyslexia understand their own particular dyslexia. As I came to find out that there are 70 types of dyslexia. And when I would read down the things to look for if you are dyslexic, a classic for me is I have a really hard time knowing my lefts from my rights. To this day, I still do. If I'm driving in a car and someone said, do we take a left or a right? I have to put my hand up to know which way is left and right still. I sometimes have a hard time with time and telling time. It's better now, but I would get very confused because I didn't have a reference or a real clear understanding that, say, a 7 came before the 9 or a 3 came before 6. The linear method of how numbers go help you with calculations, help you with knowing the days of the week, help you with chronological order, and understanding that that's a very linear process. And those that are dyslexic, for a lot of us, we have a very hard time accessing the left side of our brain, which is logical linear thinking. We are very much taking up space in our right side, which is abstract and maybe big picture thinking, but it can lack detail. And so that falls into the details of, say, math and calculations in linear time. So as I had been stepping into reading this list, and one of the biggest things that is difficult for me is that I have a hard time finding my words. And so I might know a word on a test and know what it means, but I can't always retrieve it in my mind to speak it. And I also have a really hard time pronouncing it. And so on the podcast, you might hear me either use a word that is very basic because I cannot retrieve the word that I want, or I may mispronounce a word. And for so long, there's been so much shame for myself in the past about hiding behind that and knowing that how can I not do better with that or learn to move past that, or, why is that so difficult for me? And as a kid and a kiddo and a teenager in school, I would be so embarrassed by that. But as an adult, I realized that my brain just works differently. It doesn't work less. It just doesn't work the way that a lot of people's brains work. That if I have to grab linear information, I have to work really hard to go from the right side of my brain all the way over to my left and retrieve it. It's not automatic for me. And that comes up as like this word retrieval and understanding that I know the words, I just can't always speak them. And especially when I'm writing, I will reverse words or say things that may not have the right meaning. And so over time, I've had to really work with that, slow down. Assistive technology has been a godsend for those that are on this spectrum of learning, as it's been told to me that it is a learning processing, disorder. I guess I would look at it as it's a process learning here we go with me trying to process, and I'm trying to find my words right now. So let me back up because I just lost the words. But I find it's a learning, processing challenge that has its strengths and its weaknesses. So for many people who are dyslexic, and the education that I had going through the Davis program with the incredible care and legitimacy of Amesbury, Massachusetts, I learned a lot about the fact that being dyslexic, I can tend to be very disorientated. So what that looks like is I might be reading a book, and there will be a really detailed description of, say, this beautiful cabin in the woods with 4 windows and a chimney place made out of stone, and there's fire and smoke coming out of the chimney. There's beautiful forest all around it. And I see the detail of that, and then all of a sudden, 4 paragraphs down, I am like at the lake, and I don't know how I got there in the book, because I was so engaged with the detail and the pictures of the cabin that as I was reading the sight words that bring me to the next paragraph, I disorientated because I couldn't put a picture to the sight words, which are was, if. And so my reading comprehension would not be great because I would disorientate in my mind when there weren't pictures for me to really grasp the concept of the story. And so one of the things that happens with those that are dyslexic is they just come out of there. They go to the right side and they hang out there. It's this deep place of your imagination when you feel bored, or the work that you're doing isn't challenging. We tend to disorientate and go somewhere else. And so the Davis program kind of taught me to reorientate myself, to focus on what I'm doing. And that helps me really, stay present with the work that I'm doing. So disorientation is really common, can be common for those that are dyslexic. My handwriting, again, was a real telltale sign. To this day, as an adult, I might go through 8 thank you cards to somebody because I don't know what to say, and sometimes my handwriting gets really messy. So I'll now write it on a notepad before I write it on the card, and even then sometimes I have to rewrite the card because sometimes I can't read what I've written, or sometimes I don't know what to say. And so that ties into that dyslexia doesn't look the same for everybody, because some days I can write really good and neat and tidy and, coherently, and some days I cannot. And one thing I learned being dyslexic is that we all have thresholds of exhaustion. And so some days I'm more aligned and can see the work that I'm doing and be there, and some days I'm not. If I'm tired, if I'm stressed out. So one of the things that really supports somebody who's dyslexic is knowing that sometimes dyslexia isn't always consistent, and it shows up in ways that is different all the time. But there are those hallmark signs of how we process. Am I hearing the information? Do I have good word retrieval, which I don't have good word retrieval. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I understand a lot of words. I understand their meanings. I just cannot always spell them or retrieve them or use them to articulate, which for me is frustrating. And it's something I'm always working on and very, very aware of. And sometimes I will lose my thought because I'm trying to keep track of the words in my head to speak to somebody, say in an interview, or just in normal conversation. And I've noticed that starting this podcast, it's like front and center for me to be uber aware of that potential weakness for me that I am working on strengthening. And that's my challenge. So I share this with all of you because it's so important. And I want to just also share that one of the books that was pivotal for me for understanding the way my brain works is called The Gift of Dyslexia by Ron Davis. It's called The Gift of Dyslexia by Ron Davis. And he really goes into that piece of disorientation and understanding how many variations of dyslexia there are out there, and the tremendous amount of work we can do to help our brains not fix it, because you cannot fix dyslexia, but learn to live with your dyslexia and how it benefits you, because it truly is a gift. I feel like my dyslexia is such a gift for me today, and I can see it that way. And I'll get into why I'm saying that. So when I had this light bulb moment, and I was diagnosed at 34 with being dyslexic, like it's like somebody turned the lights on in a very dark house that I've been living in most of my life, and realizing there was so much more, not only to my house, but my world. And everything just started to make sense. It started to make sense that there wasn't something wrong with me, that I wasn't dumb or stupid or all the things I would tell myself, that there was a reason why things were very difficult for me than the average person. And I always like to relate it to that. Imagine, and I've always wanted to do this, that if you go into a group of students at a high school and you give every student there a clipboard with a piece of paper and a pencil, and you give them this test, and this is the test. You say, I want everybody here to write their name and address as many times as possible in the next 2 minutes, as best you can, as neat as you can, and as fast as you can, but use your opposite hand. Do your best job and go now. And I've always wanted to do that, simply showing that when those that are in school that are either diagnosed with dyslexia or learning processing disorder, when they're in school, we do our best to keep up. We do our best to keep up with the handwriting, with speaking out in front of class, reading out loud, when sometimes we cannot associate and enunciate the words that are in front of us. We try our best, but it's exhausting. And so this little test of everybody writing their name and their address as fast as possible and as neat as possible with their opposite hand, it kind of gives you the experience of what it feels like for some people who are dyslexic at certain times to really struggle to keep up, to do the best they can with the limited resources that they have, or the limited understanding those have around how it can feel to try to find words in your head, to speak words, to write legibly when it can be exhausting. And so I just always thought that that would be something that would allow others to maybe understand or to walk in their shoes for those 2 minutes of wanting to do the best you can and being frustrated that you're not. And I held on to that for so long. And so as I look back and just sharing that story about, if you went into a school and gave that exercise to people, how would they feel? I think for me, it's about bringing connection to people. It brings it back to the suffering I've had in my own life with my own dyslexia, and the suffering I went on for so long silently, not knowing what it was. I mean, my parents didn't know because no one really talked about it. Nobody's been educated at the time that I was going to school to really understand what dyslexia was, other than that you see words in reverse, which it's so much more than that. In fact, I'm a fast reader and I can read, especially when I'm interested in something, but it's not about word reversal for me. I see words fine. For some people it is. So this brings me into this place of suffering that brings me into stepping into this work to see extraordinary pictures and images and information in my mind as I became a psychic, and then taking it a step further and developing that with my clairs to receive information from spirit as a medium. And I know and I feel in every ounce of who I am that my journey of understanding my dyslexia and accepting my dyslexia in the way that I see pictures in my mind from a very young child, as a teenager, as a young adult, and can translate things very fast, has not only helped me embrace my psychic awareness and my mediumship abilities, but it helps me tremendously. And that's where my strength has really been shown to me. And nothing happens. There's nothing that doesn't happen in our life for a reason. And if I look back now and I look at my journey of understanding my dyslexia, coming to terms with it and releasing the shame, because there's so much shame that I held. You know, even today I'll get frustrated that I don't have the neatest handwriting, and that when I write thank you cards to people or anything, I'm very aware of that. But I also say, hey, it's who I am. It's who you are. And there's so much more to me than just my handwriting. And you know what? Even my messy handwriting is great. It's just this acceptance, like it's okay. Sometimes I have to think and pause before I speak to somebody, whether it's on this podcast, whether it's in a normal conversation. Sometimes I don't know how to pronounce words still. I can see it in my mind. I just can't pull it in through my head and my thoughts and speak it the way that it should be pronounced. And I have learned to be really easy and gentle with myself. And as I share this story with all of you, it's kind of an understanding of who I am and what I walk through every day. And I think it's what makes me who I am too, and that understanding that things can be difficult, and that walk in suffering that is so near and dear to my heart to help people just hits so close to home for me, because I have lived that and I continue to. And my beautiful daughter was diagnosed with a learning processing disorder. Am I saying that the wrong way? Is it a processing learning disorder or learning processing disorder? See, I'm going to reverse everything. Basically, when she went into kindergarten, and because I knew what to look for, I knew that she held all those signs. My personal opinion is so many children go into school, and I don't want to make a blanket statement here, but there are so many children that are just not ready to understand the alphabet, understanding what 1 through 9 looks like, understanding math, understanding linear things. There's so many beautiful children out there that really operate in the right side of the hemisphere and have such a beautiful imaginations and are problem solvers. And my goal and my wish someday is to create schools and environments that really promote that and encourage it, as everybody has a strength to bring to the table, whether you are right and left brain, right brain, or left brain only. There's so much diversity out there that I support, especially those, because I have walked it and I continue to as an adult in this beautiful mind of mine that's dyslexic. So I am the Dyslexic Psychic. I am the dyslexic medium. I own that, and I have conversations with myself. It's like I talk to my dyslexia, and I say, hey, what's today going to bring us? And I also know, because of the way my brain works, it's also this incredible, profound gift that I'm able to see and translate and work with spirit, and step into this non-physical world to interpret so much more than what's right here. And there's not a day that goes by that I'm not tremendously grateful for that sacrifice. So if I had to struggle with my dyslexia, the payoff and the gift is that I get to do the work that I'm doing today, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for the way that my brain works. And it's hard not to be really grateful for that. So I want to thank you for staying with me if you've been with me this long. It's definitely an area that I'm probably going to talk about again, or it will come up in my podcasts as you hear more about sharing the work that I do, bringing on speakers. And if you have anything you'd like to reach out and share with me, please do, because this subject matter around dyslexia is so near and dear to me. And my guess is, I can't say this, that there's probably many people that tap into non-physical life through psychic abilities and mediumship that are most likely, or a lot of people may have that learning processing disorder, and may not even know it. We're just much more comfortable being in that right side in our imagination and really thinking about things. So honor yourself wherever you are. If you are looking for information, there's so many great resources out there. I think the Yale Center for Dyslexia Studies is a great resource, and I will put these links because I don't have them. I'm not going to say them correctly because I'm probably going to reverse them. There's an amazing documentary that I can't recommend enough called The Big Picture, Rethinking Dyslexia, and it came out probably about 10, 12 years ago. Robert Redford's grandson directed it and produced it, I believe. He did both of those things. There's so many more resources out there, and I'll do as many links as I can to get the word out there, but embrace your dyslexia. If you're dyslexic, own it. It's incredible. It's a superpower. It really is. And the more that we can honor the way that our brains and our minds think, imagine how much more we can do for ourselves and support others feeling that way for themselves. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening again. And really happy and excited to share this little piece about myself. It's actually a pretty big piece. All right. Have a great day.